Have you ever wondered what drove censors to ban some of the most shocking exploitation films of the 1940s? From taboo-breaking teen scandals to unflinching portrayals of real-life horrors, these 20 movies dared to show the unspeakable. In this countdown, we'll reveal the brutal stories behind each banned classic. Hit subscribe, like, and ring the bell to join us on this forbidden journey. Street Corner. Albert H. Kelly's Street Corner offers a shocking examination of teenage pregnancy, clandestine abortion, and the consequences of fast living in a small town. Narrated by a concerned family doctor, the story follows high schooler Lois Marsh as she discovers she's pregnant by her boyfriend, Bob Mason. When Bob dies in a car crash en route to meet Lois, she's driven underground to an unlicensed abortionist. Graphic depictions of the abortion itself, complete with bloodied aftermath, are interwoven with a climactic lecture on venereal disease, female anatomy, and childbirth. For audiences raised on sanitized studio fare, these scenes were jaw-dropping. Local Catholic authorities placed Street Corner on their condemned list, and National Legion of Decency records show it received a C rating, effectively banning it from morally compliant venues. Its raw visuals and taboo subject matter made it a staple of the underground hygiene circuit, and a poster child for postcode exploitation. Child Bride. Originally produced in 1938 and reissued in 1943 under the title Child Bride, Harry Reviere's low-budget shocker traffics in one of the most perverse taboos of the era, underage marriage. The film markets itself as a social issues drama, but all eyes are on a notorious sequence in which 12-year-old Shirley Mills swims nude, an unprecedented breach of the Hays Code's ban on on-screen child nudity. The Production Code Administration refused to grant it a seal of approval, branding its subject matter a sexually abhorrent abnormality and its nude scenes inexcusable. Despite, or because of, this Child Bride found a second life on the exploitation circuit, only to be banned in multiple jurisdictions for its scandalous content. Its infamy endures as a case study in how educational pretexts were used to smuggle sensationalism past censors. Born to Kill. Robert Wise's directorial debut in noir, Born to Kill, shocked 1947 audiences with Lawrence Tierney's remorseless anti-hero and a string of on-screen murders so visceral they tested the limits of the Hays Code. When Sam Wilde bludgeons his rival, and then the rival's lover, to death in back-alley fury, audiences recoiled at the film's unsentimental violence. Tierney's off-screen brawls only added to the controversy. State review boards in Ohio, Chicago, and Memphis outright refused to license the film, and the National Legion of Decency eyed it warily. The Motion Picture Association ultimately barred Born to Kill from theatrical reissue, listing it among 14 objectionable and unsuitable titles that could never play in adult houses again. Its legacy lies in how it forced Hollywood to reckon with the power of unvarnished screen violence and the repressive force of its own self-censorship. Scarlet Street. Fritz Lang's Scarlet Street trades pulpy crime for a bleak tale of obsession and betrayal in post-war America. Edward G. Robinson plays meat cashier Christopher "Chris" Cross, who becomes entangled with the glamorous Kitty March and her ruthless gangster boyfriend. When Cross's art is stolen, his life unravels into blackmail, forgery, and finally, cold-blooded murder. Lang's shadowy cinematography and a haunting climax in which Cross's world collapses in ruin push the film over the edge for censors. In January 1946, the New York State Censor Board banned the film as obscene, indecent, immoral, inhuman, and sacrilegious, and both Milwaukee and Atlanta followed suit, citing its sordid themes that threatened to corrupt morals. Today it stands as one of the darkest and most hotly contested noirs of the 1940s. Souls in Pawn. Imagine slipping into a makeshift theater in late 1940, drawn by cries of "See the shocking truth of unwed motherhood," emblazoned on a lurid poster. What greeted audiences was Souls in Pawn, a 62-minute exploitation drama directed by Melville Shire and produced by shock film impresario Willis Kent. The story follows Nan Carey, a college student who becomes pregnant when her fiancé balks at commitment. Alone and desperate, she gives birth in secrecy believing she is doing the right thing. Instead, she signs away her child, only to discover that the supposed adoption agency is a front for a burlesque queen's publicity stunt. The infant is sold into a world of striptease and scandal, turning Nan's agony into a spectacle for paying strangers. Shire, a founder of the Directors Guild of America, framed each scene in stark black and white, using sharp lighting contrasts to heighten the feeling of real life bleeding into celluloid. Cinematographer Harvey Gould's close-up shots of Nan's tear-streaked face and the burlesque stage's flickering lights give the film a quasi-documentary intensity. Kent, already infamous for films like The Pace That Kills, marketed Souls in Pawn on the roadshow circuit, complete with live moralist lectures, so he could bypass the Hays office's refusal to grant a seal of approval. Local censorship boards recoiled at its unflinching depiction of unwed pregnancy, infant trafficking, and striptease intertwined with moralizing narration. The Catholic Legion of Decency slapped it with a C rating, condemning it as wholly exploitative and unfit for any audience. Within weeks, at least 8 states, including Massachusetts and Ohio, banned it outright. Underground midnight screenings sprang up, cementing its reputation as forbidden cinema. Today, Souls in Pawn remains a landmark in roadshow exploitation, remembered as much for its battle with censors as for its brutal portrayal of human desperation. Lash of the Penitentes. By the mid-1930s, director Harry Revier had carved out a niche on the states' rights market by pushing the boundaries of what was acceptable. His 1936 shockumentary, Lash of the Penitentes, combines authentic footage of the Penitente Brotherhood's self-flagellation rituals with a flimsy framing story of murder and betrayal. Revier, who discovered discarded ethnographic reels of New Mexico's flagellant cult, built a racy feature around images of hooded penitents whipping themselves in the desert sun. He even inserted stage scenes, most notoriously a nude crucifixion, that blurred the line between documentary and exploitation. Rivier's approach was straightforward: promise true footage of forbidden rites, then deliver recreations that guaranteed audience outrage. He co-directed with Roland Price, whose camera work lent the film an unsettling immediacy. The narration, voiced by Billy Bletcher, veers between moralizing sermon and titillating tease, ensuring viewers never feel entirely safe. Despite, or because of, its religious subject matter, local boards deemed it blasphemous and indecent. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned it in 1940, branding the film repellent for its gratuitous display of violence and partial nudity, and several states barred its screening. In true exploitation fashion, Revier marketed the ban as validation, billing the film as forbidden to all except the truly curious. Audiences flocked to underground venues to witness its mix of genuine ritual and sensational fakery. Today, Lash of the Penitentes stands as a textbook example of 1930s to 1940s exploitation cinema, brutal, unapologetic, and forever entangled with the era's censorship battles. Stolen Paradise. In April 1940, independent producer George A. Herleman released Stolen Paradise, directed by Louis J. Gasniers and filmed on location in Coral Gables, Florida. Marketed alternately as Adolescence, the film stars Leon Janney as Richard Gordon, a sheltered 18-year-old seminary student summoned home when his father remarries. Audiences expecting a straightforward morality tale were unsettled by the taboo twist. Richard falls in love with his much older stepsister Patricia. Gasnier, fresh from the infamy of Reefer Madness, wove a narrative that brimmed with awkward glances, steamy undercurrents, and whispered gossip. Capitalizing on America's fascination with youth gone astray, Stolen Paradise pushed into dangerous territory, incestuous suggestion, false piety, and the consequences of repressed desire. Distributor Monogram. Pictures allowed Herleman to exploit the Hays office's hesitancy by touring the film regionally, accompanied by talkback sessions that framed it as an educational warning. Nevertheless, censors recoiled. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned it as objectionable for scandalous scenes, suggestive of incest and undermining of family values, and several local boards refused to grant exhibition licenses. Despite official bans in states such as Pennsylvania and Virginia, Clandestine showings at small independent theaters drew curious crowds. The film's underground success only fueled its legend as one of the 1940s most sensationally banned youth films. Over 80 years later, Stolen Paradise remains a stark reminder of how exploitation cinema weaponized taboo to challenge and provoke the moral arbiters of its time. Secrets of a Model. On April 11, 1940, Continental Pictures quietly released Secrets of a Model, directed by Sam Newfield on Poverty Row, and starring Cheryl Walker as Rita Wilson. Ostensibly a drama about a waitress seeking money for her mother's surgery, the film quickly veers into scandal. Rita becomes an artist's model, endures a drunken one-night stand with her wealthy sponsor Jack Thorndike, and contracts a mystery illness that forces her into the hospital. The lurid scenes of strip poker, drugged cocktails, and suggestive poses merely set the stage for moral collapse. Newfield and producer J.D. Kendis exploited every moment. Low-budget production values were overshadowed by Newfield's fast pacing and the promise of risque content that mainstream studios would never touch. Local censors, already on high alert for pre-code wildness, slammed the film for its improper display of immodest behavior and forced cuts to several scenes. Although the Production Code Administration refused a seal of approval, Continental Pictures distributed the film through independent channels, billing it as an educational exposé on the dangers of loose living. The Catholic Legion of Decency never formally rated Secrets of a Model, but state boards in at least 5 jurisdictions banned it outright for offensive sexual suggestion. Audiences seeking thrills in small grindhouses made it a sleeper hit on the exploitation circuit. Today, the film survives as a compact time capsule of Poverty Row's willingness to trade on scandal and the lengths to which 1940 authorities would go to keep its secrets hidden. Mad Youth. Despite its innocent-sounding title, Mad Youth opens with a flash of neon signs and jitterbug fever that signal trouble ahead. Directed by Melville Shire for Willis Kent Productions, this 76-minute feature stars Mary Ainsley as Mary Morgan, a high school graduate whose mother, Helen, hires a glamorous male escort to compensate for lost youth. During a wild house party, Mary is drawn into strip poker and dance sequences, only to discover that the escort counts more than her mother's affections. He preyed on Mary as well. Shot in quick succession on the backlots of Poverty Row, Shire's film traffics in sensationalism, white slavery rings, seduction, and teen rebellion. Producer Willis Kent, already notorious for films like Human Wreckage, marketed Mad Youth as a cautionary tale of parental neglect, but trimmed moral warnings did little to disguise its exploitative thrills. The Catholic Legion of Decency condemned it in 1939 for its gratuitous portrayal of juvenile vice and indecent situations, prompting a C rating and bans in major cities. Yet band notoriety bred underground demand. Midnight screenings in urban grindhouses saw packed houses of curious teens and titillated elders alike. Reviews lamented its low-budget aesthetics, but conceded its undeniable pull. Today, Mad Youth endures as a prototype of juvenile delinquency exploitation, a brutal, unvarnished glimpse at the underbelly of the American teen dream. Mom and Dad. In early 1945, Kroger Babb unleashed Mom and Dad, a sex hygiene roadshow directed by William Bodine that masqueraded as educational yet reveled in taboo. Audiences flocked to segregated screenings. Men and women watched separately, where live hygiene lecturers delivered sensational moralizing before and after the film's centerpiece, an unflinching childbirth scene that promised viewers they would actually see the birth of a baby. Produced on a shoestring budget of $67,001 and shot in 6 days across Monogram backlots, Babb's touring strategy involved hundreds of prints, fabricated protest letters sent to local newspapers, and staged fainting spells to stoke controversy. These tactics generated a staggering estimated gross of $40 to $100 million, making it the most profitable exploitation film of the 1940s and cementing Babb's reputation as a master showman. Despite its financial triumph, Mom and Dad faced relentless legal and moral challenges. The National Legion of Decency condemned it as wholly exploitative and dozens of state and municipal boards imposed outright bans or demanded extensive cuts to its frank discussion of venereal disease, premarital sex, and childbirth. Nearly 428 lawsuits targeted Babb and the film's presenters during its extended roadshow run, and in New York City, it remained barred until a 1956 court ruled that a live birth did not equate to indecency. Yet each censorship battle only fueled its outlaw allure. To this day, Mom and Dad stands as a landmark of 1940s exploitation cinema, an unapologetic collision of education, exhibitionism, and entrepreneurial bravado. The Devil's Sleep. By 1949, photographer-turned-producer George Weiss tapped the same moral panic that had fueled Reefer Madness to create The Devil's Sleep, directed by W. Merle Connell. Framed as a cautionary expose, the film follows sleazy entrepreneur Umberto Scali as he peddles amphetamines at a women's health spa and dispenses Benzedrine to teenagers at swinging parties. Connell's gritty black and white cinematography, shot in cramped gymnasiums retrofitted as health clubs, juxtaposes lurid fitness routines with underage drug use, burglary sprees, and blackmail plots. Scali's scenes of young women pill-popping in frilly leotards, set to a lurid theremin score, pushed far beyond the production code's boundaries. Local censorship boards reacted swiftly. The Catholic Legion of Decency slapped The Devil's Sleep with a C rating, condemning its gratuitous portrayal of juvenile vice and indecent situations. Several major cities refused to issue exhibition licenses, forcing Weiss to rely on clandestine grindhouse and drive-in bookings, where audiences reveled in its transgressive thrills. Despite its amateurish acting and exploitative framing, the film found a devoted following as a forbidden spectacle, launching the Umberto Scali trilogy, and solidifying the drug-warning genre as a staple of late 40s exploitation cinema. Hollywood Burlesque. In the waning days of burlesque theater, J.D. Kendis of Continental Pictures captured forbidden strips and risque comedy routines in Hollywood Burlesque. Filmed on location at San Diego's notorious Hollywood Theater, the feature presents a review of live striptease acts, bump-and-grind dance numbers, and bawdy vaudeville sketches. Kendis, already known for low-budget shockers, employed stage lighting and tight close-ups to accentuate every tassel twirl and suggestive shimmy, framing it as an anthropological peek behind the velvet curtain of adult entertainment. The Catholic Legion of Decency, alarmed by its overt titillation, condemned Hollywood Burlesque in June 1949, branding it indecent for any audience. Several dioceses and state boards followed suit, ordering its removal from mainstream theaters. Undeterred, Kendis marketed the bands as proof of authenticity, driving grindhouse bookings and late-night showings, where curious crowds paid top dollar for a glimpse of dancers shedding layers to jazz and drum accompaniment. Today, the film endures as one of the era's rawest burlesque documentations, emblematic of exploitation's marriage of scandal and salesmanship. Bob and Sally, Universal Studios. Bob and Sally, later retitled The Story of Bob and Sally, arrived in late 1948 as a sanitized spin on Kroger Babb's Mom and Dad template. Directed by Early C. Kenton, the drama chronicles high school sweethearts Bob Jordan and Sally Wright as they navigate unplanned pregnancy, amateur abortion, and social stigma, intercut with staged medical footage and didactic sermons from Dr. Lauren Carey. The film pretends to champion public health while reveling in whispered innuendo and educational intrigue. Production code objections stalled its release. Universal shelved the film after Production Code Administration threats of enforcement, eventually sold to independent circuits. The Story of Bob and Sally played roadshow engagements alongside burlesque double bills, its moral framing unable to conceal risque undertones. The Legion of Decency condemned it in 1949 for improper spotlight on juvenile vice, and several local boards banned it outright, cementing its status as a second-generation hygiene shocker. While overshadowed by its predecessor, it remains a key artifact of late 40s exploitation's blend of public service pretense and lurid content. She Shoulda Said No, capitalizing on Lila Leeds and Robert Mitchum's 1948 marijuana arrests. Sam Newfield's She Shoulda Said No premiered in Chicago in July 1949. Leeds plays a clean-cut college girl lured into jazz clubs, then into the marijuana underworld, complete with eerie theremin music and hallucination montages. Newfield shot the film in 6 days, then turned distribution over to Kroger Babb's Hallmark Productions, which rebranded it with lurid posters promising "How bad can a good girl get without losing her virtue?" Critics derided its stilted performances and heavy-handed propaganda, but local censors were more alarmed by its frank drug imagery. The Catholic Legion of Decency officially condemned it in April 1951 as immoral, and multiple state boards prohibited its exhibition. Babb leaned into the notoriety, staging lectures by former addicts and sending forged tax department endorsements to theater managers. Underground midnight showings in urban grindhouses transformed it into an illicit rite of passage for thrill seekers. Decades later, its public domain status and camp value have ensured She Shoulda Said No, a lasting afterlife among exploitation aficionados. Delinquent Daughters. In the waning months of World War II, Producers Releasing Corporation unleashed Delinquent Daughters, a hard-hitting teen melodrama directed by Albert Herman that pulls no punches. The film opens on the tragic suicide of high schooler Lucille Dillerton, who leaps from a bridge after a night of illicit partying with her classmates. Rather than wallow in melodrama, the narrative pivots to a police investigation that uncovers a shocking underground network of underage drinking, gun running, and juvenile crime. June Carlson's June Thompson embodies the era's good girl, torn between parental expectations and the lure of the city's nightlife. Fifi Dorsey's Mimi personifies the no-holds-barred bad influence. Scenes of teens clubbing, casual gun sales, and a fatal car chase were so frank that local censorship boards in Chicago and elsewhere quietly banned the film, fearing it would incite real-world delinquency. Its unflinching depiction of youth violence and moral breakdown made it one of the most notorious and locally prohibited juvenile delinquency pictures of the decade. The burning question. Imagine crowds drawn by whispers of true footage of chaos on screen, yet the shoot-it-like-a-documentary verite of The Burning Question was pure exploitation from start to finish. Originally released in 1938 as Tell Your Children, Louis J. Gaznier's film was picked up by Dwayne Esper and recut with new titles and additional inserts in 1940. These range from stage convulsions to amateurish murder reenactments, all paced to a frenzied theremin soundtrack that promised to expose marijuana as a passport to insanity. Proclaimed an educational warning to teens, it instead trafficked in sensationalism. Posters touted live-action weed fights, and promoters dangled the lure of forbidden content, sending protest letters to newspapers to stoke controversy. But state censors saw the ploy. The Maryland State Board of Censors, under Sidney R. Traub, condemned it in 1949 as unfit for public morals, while Pennsylvania and West Virginia refused to license it, citing gratuitous depiction of drug rituals. Underground midnight roadshows, complete with live drug education lectures, only amplified its mythos. Today, The Burning Question endures as an archetype of exploitation cinema, where shock and salesmanship eclipsed any claim to genuine public health messaging. We Accuse. In 1945, producer Harriet Parsons and director Oliver Wendell Holmes delivered We Accuse, a searing documentary of the Kharkiv War Crimes Tribunal that stripped away Hollywood's comfortable distance from conflict. Instead of staged dramas, the film cut directly to horror, survivors' statements, piled corpses, burned villages. Its unblinking depiction of Nazi brutality, including lingering shots of mass graves, shattered the production code's prohibition on undue horror and profanity. The Motion Picture Production Code Administration refused the film its seal, denouncing its use of the word damned and its graphic imagery as excessively gruesome. City boards followed suit. New York State's Board of Regents, wary of inflamed public sentiment and potential unrest, revoked exhibition licenses, while major municipalities labeled it subversive and morally corrosive. Despite bans, We Accuse found refuge in small art houses, where intellectuals debated morality versus historical truth. Attendees recalled its nerve-shattering effect. an urgent reminder that cinema could be a tool for justice, not just entertainment. Today it stands as a landmark of post-war exploitation, a film that dared to leverage shock to confront audiences with the very real horrors they had long preferred to ignore. No Orchids for Miss Blandish. First released in Britain, St. John Lash closes. No Orchids for Miss Blandish crossed the Atlantic in 1948 as a grim gangster yarn dripping with sadistic brutality. Adapted from James Hadley Chase's scandalous novel, its American cut retained the most shocking sequences. The protagonist's abduction by hoodlums, a scene of forced striptease at knife point, and an on-screen murder where a victim is stabbed to the beat of a jaunty jazz tune. Critics decried it as the most sickening exhibition of brutality, perversion, sex, and sadism ever to be shown on a cinema screen. In 1949, Maryland's State Board of Censors, led by Sidney R. Traub, placed it on its condemned list, calling it devoid of redeeming social value and banning all screenings. Other jurisdictions followed. Theaters in Pennsylvania and Chicago quietly withdrew prints, and New York censors demanded cuts to every scene that hinted at sexual violence. Despite, or because of, its reputation, bootleg exchanges circulated second-generation prints in private clubs, cementing its cult status among crime film aficionados. Today, No Orchids for Miss Blandish is studied as a touchstone of GI exploitation, a film whose sensationalist excesses forced censorship boards to reckon with the darker appetites of post-war audiences. Duel in the Sun. King Vidor's epic Western Duel in the Sun arrived with unprecedented fanfare at the close of 1946, yet it stirred scandal from its first reel. Jennifer Jones's sultry performance as the orphaned half-Comanche Pearl Chavez is overshadowed by a harrowing rape scene, staged with lurid close-ups and thunderous score that broke new ground in on-screen violence. Moments later, Joseph Cotton's character bludgeons a man to death, leaving blood splatters across Arizona's red mesas. Imagery so raw that Tennessee censors under Lloyd T. Binford refused it a license in 1947, citing 2 murders, then a rape, then a train wreck, and ended with 2 murders as too mature for local audiences. The New York Motion Picture Commission and the Milwaukee Police Department followed suit, banning it outright and forcing Selznick to trim over half an hour of footage. Excluded from many adult houses, the film nonetheless recouped its exorbitant budget through higher ticket prices in permissive territories. Today, Duel in the Sun is recognized both as a technical marvel and a flashpoint in the dialogue over cinematic violence. A Western that tested the limits of the production code and proved that epic storytelling need not shy away from its darkest impulses. Mom and Dad. By mid-1945, sex hygiene maestro Kroger Babb turned moral outrage into box office gold with Mom and Dad. Framed as an educational film on venereal disease and childbirth, director William Bodine embedded a nearly uncut live birth sequence, shot with a single blade of grass obscuring the infant's face, into what otherwise reads as an exploitative cautionary tale. Babb's marketing was as audacious as the film itself. He shipped hundreds of prints on roadshow tours, stage fainting spontaneous seizures in auditoriums, and segregated screenings by gender to maximize titillation. The religious lobby didn't flinch. The National Legion of Decency condemned it as wholly exploitative, and state boards in Massachusetts, Ohio, and Philadelphia imposed outright bans or demanded heavy cuts before permitting any projection. The New York State Board held the film until 1956, when a court ruled that childbirth, however graphic, did not constitute obscenity. Despite thousands of lawsuits, Mom and Dad grossed between $40 million and $100 million, becoming the most profitable exploitation film of the decade. Today it stands as an icon of 1940s roadshow spectacle, a perfect storm of shock, salesmanship, and the era's fraught struggles over morality and cinema. These banned exploitation films pushed the boundaries of what was acceptable, showing raw violence, taboo subjects, and unfiltered reality. Their legacy endures in the ongoing debate over censorship, art, and morality. Thanks for watching our deep dive into cinema's most controversial moments. Don't forget to like, comment, and share below.